Jacques Vallee's Passport to Magonia appeared the year before Keel's UFO book in 1969. The conclusions here are remarkably similar. Vallee is a trained astronomer who helped map Mars for NASA at the University of Texas, Austin, before he earned a PhD in computer science at Northwestern University. Like Keel, he began with a physicalist understanding of the UFO, but then abandoned the simplicity as the data piled up. Even as he remains to this day committed to exploring the physical evidence and traces of the phenomena in literally hundreds of case studies in the global field. In Vallee's readings, the UFO phenomena returns to the radar and revelation paradox of my opening failed joke. His fascination began with a very clear sighting of a flying saucer hovering over a Paris suburb in broad daylight. Nothing ambiguous here. It was an actual object floating in the sky in broad daylight that he and a friend both saw from different parts of the neighborhood. He accepts no qualifications here. It was a flying saucer. On the revelation side, Vallee is famous for arguing that the UFO is best contextualized in the history of religions, in demonology, and in comparative folklore as an esoteric manifestation of some other, quite real, hyperdimensional intelligence. Perhaps even some future form of consciousness reaching back into the past, that is, into our present. Vallee does not claim to know what is going on here, but he suspects some kind of recalibration from the future aimed at our mythology and largely unconscious belief systems. I should add that Vallee's mentor and colleague was J. Allen Hynek, an accomplished astronomer, supernova researcher, spy satellite tracking pioneer, inspired by Sputnik, and eventually the foremost scientific authority on the UFO in the U.S. Hynek himself eventually arrived at a very similar radar and revelation model, but he came to the subject as a convinced and openly dismissive skeptic. That was before he encountered the actual data. In terms of the data, Hynek did not generally like cases of what he called close encounters of the third kind. That is, cases involving entities, monsters, or what I will call biological gods. Perhaps the most famous of these was the Pascagoula abduction. The Pascagoula abduction of 1973, which featured two fishermen taken on board a glowing ship by three floating clawed creatures with no faces. These bizarre accounts did little to legitimize the study of UFO events. More to the point, they always came to Hynek as stories, not as hard physical evidence. The astronomer was much more comfortable with close encounters of the second kind, that is, with those cases that involved physical evidence. These at least were amenable to the scientific method and did not embarrass. The astronomer wanted radar returns, burned grass, and stalled tractors, not stories of monsters that looked like they had stepped out of a bad Hollywood movie from the 1950s. Hynek was deeply suspicious of the simple nuts and bolts from outer space hypothesis. Toward the end of his life, in a famous Omni magazine interview, Hynek followed his colleague George Wald at Harvard and openly speculated that, quote, consciousness may be separate from the vehicle that contains it. More specifically, he pondered whether UFOs might be three-dimensional holographic thought forms projected by such an alien form of consciousness. Hynek also suggested that, quote, perhaps UFOs are instruments introducing us to a new notion of life and reality. UFOs may be illusions created by consciousness that exists apart from protoplasm, unquote. This time at Northwestern University, where he spent most of his academic career, Hynek articulated a position that I have heard Vallee articulate many times, that he would be very disappointed if these things were nothing more exotic than spaceships from the stars. They are likely far, far stranger than this clunky, easy explanation. This is pure Alan Hynek and pure Jacques Vallee.